Welcome to the PYA Onboard Safety Group, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Guy, and I work at Seascope France. I've been working in the yachting industry for over 20 years, and I am the administrator of the Onboard Safety Group. As part of the PYA, this group is dedicated to promoting best practices in onboard safety, creating awareness around safety issues, and fostering a safer and more supportive working environment for the yachting community. Our aim is to improve safety, prevent incidents, and foster collaboration, which leads us to why we are talking about enclosed spaces. We chose this topic as there are an increasing number of incidents occurring on super yachts, sometimes leading to fatalities. Enclosed spaces do exist on super yachts, chain lockers, battery lockers, peak tanks, void spaces, to name a few. And again, our intention here is not to point fingers, but to highlight potentially simple solutions and create awareness of these dangerous spaces. And now let me briefly introduce our guest panelists. Adam Parnell is the Director of CHIRP Maritime and has over 3 decades of experience at sea and ashore. Currently, he handles the incident reports at CHIRP from the superyacht industry. We also have Barry Sadler. He is an unrestricted first-class Southampton marine pilot. Bit of a tongue twister there. I got through it. With nearly 40 years of experience in the Maritime Field. He is also an associate fellow at both the Royal Institute of Navigation and Nautical Institute. And rounding out the panel, we have Tim Russell. He's currently a freelance Y1 engineer with 23 years of experience in the yachting industry. He is skilled in operational management and new build construction. So, are we ready to begin? Let's start with Adam Parnell and the burning question. Can you share with us some of the most serious incidents that have been reported on super yachts related to enclosed spaces?
I can, Michelle. Before I do that, though, I'm going to bring a little bit of dark humor to what is actually a very dark subject, because we're talking about an incident which does regularly kill and injure people. And so for those of you who are currently on board ships, this will be a daily question that you ask yourself. And for those who are perhaps now, like me, have moved ashore, I'm inviting you to cast your brain back to the time when you were at sea. So you've been asked to go into a compartment at sea, to go and do some work, or to go because that's your place of work or unusual place of work. And what you've unwittingly been put into at that point is, I'm just going to share my screen here. What you've unwittingly then been put straight into is effectively a life or death game. And the best one that I could think of, because my son loves it, is Squid Game. Okay, so imagine Squid Game. You've just been asked to go and do a piece of work. We're going to play guess the compartment. If you pick the right compartment, you live, because it's pre-binary, the Squid Game series. And if you pick the wrong compartment, you die. So I've written some around the top there and around the bottom: engine room, water tank, tender garage, chain locker, galley, bow thruster. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to pick one, keep it in your head. And then I'm going to go and show you which ones of those have actually killed people that we know of since 2017. Okay, that's enough time. Let's go into case studies. If you picked engine room, tender garage, I'm afraid you died in that game. If you pick the other ones, you were only injured. I say only as though that was some sort of like lucky prize, but really it isn't. These are case studies. I've got 8 there that I've just pulled out from our records. I've done them in chronological order, and I'm going to just run very briefly through them. Starting on the top left, engineer on a sub 55 mid yacht, told to go and enter a bow thruster compartment, wasn't signed, went in, was asphyxiated, but was luckily managed to self-recover because he realized what was happening to him before he actually went unconscious. The second one along, not so lucky, a contractor in 2017, 90-meter yacht, working in the engine room, and actually because there was a buildup of noxious gases passed out and sadly asphyxiated before anybody could find them. Engineer in a 55-meter yacht was told to go into a black water tank to go and do some cleaning. The chief officer assumed that it had been cleaned, that a permit to work had been signed, that actually everything was good. And a junior engineer, it was a junior engineer, first job, went in and actually came out because he couldn't stand the smell. But actually, when they got used to that, they went back in. They said, "That's okay. I've got used to the smell. I've got used to the smell of sulfur. I can't smell it anymore." But actually, that's the real danger sign. And luckily, their colleague told them to get out and saved them. Not so lucky for people, an engineer and a deckhand in 2021 who entered a tender garage where they'd been charging lithium-ion batteries and doing other things as well. And a combination of all the fumes that had been let off overnight in a closed compartment turned it temporarily as they opened the door into an enclosed space, and sadly they died. Slightly more lucky, a chef on a 55-meter yacht went into the galley freezer and felt very, very dizzy, so walked back out. And what they subsequently found out was that another chef, deciding to make a very theatrical flourish at dinner, had actually decided to store dry ice in that compartment. So they turned it into a temporarily, unwittingly, an enclosed space. Recent example, 2024 engineer on a 60-meter yacht sadly died in the engine room, and also trying to work on a part of electrical system. And in 2022, the one at the bottom there, somebody going into a chain locker, and it was a very poor quality chain, and actually the chain, as it rusted, absorbed the oxygen in the locker. And again, they were actually managed to get themselves out before they actually fully passed out. But as you can see there, what I've brought out here, and I hope you've picked up of, is not only do these compartments exist on boats of all sizes, secondly, that actually we're not talking about necessarily permanently enclosed spaces. There are some spaces that will always be an enclosed space. There are those where, like the dry ice, or because of something else that's happened, some other gas given off, or something that's eaten the oxygen in that compartment, will temporarily turn it into an enclosed space. Now, why the so what? Because I've only put up 8 there over a 7-year period. Actually, in that same time, across globally, the global fleet, we've killed, or the maritime industry has killed 158. Since 1996, Intermanager tell us that 310 people that we know of have been killed. I say that we know of. We tend to know about the deaths. We tend to not know about the near misses, and that's how people classify only being asphyxiated but still living, because we have a culture across not just the superyacht industry, but the entire industry of actually being loath to report for understandable commercial and reputational reasons. People that know, if you watched one of my presentations before, know that I always talk about Robin Dunbar and the Dunbar number. This is a social scientist, a UK social scientist, who about a couple of decades ago decided or worked out that actually we all on average know about 150 people. And his working definition, which I absolutely love as a Brit, was you are one of those 150 people if you walk into a room, into a bar, and you see this person that you know, and you're prepared to have a drink with them. So we're talking about people whose death will absolutely impact on your life. And that's the issue that we're talking about here. We're not just necessarily talking about killing 150 people. We're actually multiplying that now by 150. So it's actually a large number of people being affected by this. We at CHIRP do get a number of, this is just looking for enclosed spaces in our database, and I've looked over just the last year. And as you can see there, they're not just super yacht, but some of these are super yachts. And if it's a bit of an eyesight test, I'll share the slides afterwards, but you can actually see in the title where we've actually got the words like 3 fatalities, 1 fatality, near miss. So actually, this is a really, really live issue. I was invited to explain what the insight was that we at CHIRP see from this. And I think one of the real reasons that we have, there's numerous issues, but one of them is language is an issue. I'm not singling out the Red Ensign group. They do an amazing job, but I've just pulled out from their large yacht code an issue that I think is prevalent, not just in that document, but across the industry, where we use the words enclosed spaces to mean more than one thing. So on the left-hand side of that page, there are an example of the first 18 uses of the word phrase enclosed space in the Red Ensign Group code. And I bring that one up because I know a lot of you will have your vessels registered under a Red Ensign flag registry. And on the right-hand side, on the 19th occasion of using the words enclosed space, we actually now get to the SOLAS and IMO definition of what an enclosed space is, and that's that one on 19.7 part 1. And so for us, one of the biggest issues we see is that language absolutely is an issue. And that really brings us neatly into what are the common causes. I've already mentioned the permanent versus temporary enclosed space status. There's a real issue around signage or the lack thereof, even though SOLAS and all the yacht codes and national codes and regulators require enclosed spaces to be signed. When I say a lack of understanding and awareness, we have crews that come to us and tell us that they know because of their background that they've been told to go and work in an enclosed space. And when they've brought that up, they've been told that's not an enclosed space. No, we haven't got any on board. We don't have any on board. And so as a result of not having any enclosed spaces on board, they also don't have the gas analyzer. They don't have the procedures to enter it safely. They don't have the permit to work system set up for enclosed space entry. They don't have the rescue procedures practiced or even written down necessarily. And complacency, that's not me being rude. That is actually the human factors correct terminology. More politely, risk underestimation. Lots of people underestimate the risk of an enclosed space. And these are the key issues. I'm just going to go back to signage for a minute, because actually there are signs. When in looking around this, I've become a little bit of a sign geek, and ISO 7010 actually has quite a few of these signs. And I have been in the maritime industry for over 3 decades, and I cannot ever remember seeing an enclosed space signed with any of these signs. I especially haven't ever seen any signs like this on a super yacht. Why? Because they're unsightly. They're not aesthetic. They don't fit the super yacht vibe. And yet there are signs. We should be using them. There are some signs there that I think are lacking. And actually, we are, as CHIRP, actively working through our national representative to the ISO to get some signs worked out. Because, for instance, there is one that says use self-contained breathing apparatus, the one on the bottom right, but there isn't one that says have breathing apparatus on standby or have a rescue team. You know, entry only with a supervisor in outside has a telephone. Nobody uses a telephone on a boat. We use radios. So actually, there are lots of good signs. As an industry, we really should start using them, and we are trying to get more. And to give you an example of why it's not acceptable that we don't have a sign for enclosed space, nor do we have a sign that says permit to work required before entry, is that if you go through the catalogue, you will find that there is a sign that tells you that you have to alight from your toboggan at the top of the ski lift to the left and or to the right. And so there are 2 different signs for getting out of a toboggan, but there isn't a sign for entering an enclosed space. And I think that needs to change. So that is my big key takeaway. I'm very happy to take questions when people want to give them to me. And I'm looking forward to the rest of this presentation. And thank you for listening. I hope I've given you a little bit of an insight into the causes and some of the lessons that I think we can draw from it. But I'm always willing to hear from others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Next, we have Barry Sadler. Barry, I have heard you talk on your podcast, Maritime Education. I love it. But you were talking about a near miss incident in an enclosed space. Could you share that with the group?
I go back 4 decades in the maritime industry, and the incident that I describe in one of my online podcasts is an incident that happened to me when I was a cadet. Second trip at sea, 17-year-old deck cadet, and we went down into a wing tank that we had damaged when the vessel went aground. When we're down in this wing tank, as a cadet, I wasn't shown a permit to work. I knew that they existed, but only being a 17-year-old fairly new deck cadet, didn't have the necessary knowledge, should we say, to follow up and to see whether anything had actually been done to help get me into this or out of this enclosed space. We went down into the enclosed space, and we were wearing personal oxygen analyzers, which for 40 years ago was a big thing. You know, not many companies had these, but in the company that I sell with, we had them. And our alarms went off on the oxygen analyzers, and the percentage of oxygen was down at 17. just above 17% oxygen. Now, those of you that are familiar with the Code of Safe Working Practices and other safety publications will know that that's way below the 20% recommended limit. I was told to get out of the space. 17-year-old lad, the last thing they wanted to do was cause me any harm. I was told to evacuate the space. I got out without any problems at all, a little bit out of breath when I got out there. Chief mate, he stayed down there, finished off what he was doing, came out of the tank about 5 minutes later, very, very, very breathless. I've also seen dock workers in Sembawang Yard in Singapore. I've also witnessed 2 fatalities inside a 4-peak tank in that particular shipyard, where the permit to work procedures were very, very lax indeed. And at the end, it was 2 members of the ship's company that managed to fish out these 2 young guys from inside this. It was actually a sewage tank. On those old cruise ships, pretty much every single tank they had was a sewage tank. You just had to keep your sewage on board. You had no treatment. And they went down to the forward sewage tank, which is a very, very deep tank. Readings at the top of the tank, absolutely fine. Readings at the bottom of the tank, fatal. And these 2 lads were unfortunately pulled out, deceased, onto the quayside. Never quick in Singapore to provide medical cover. The doctor turned up about 20 minutes later and declared them dead. So despite the efforts of myself and 2 of the engineers to try and get them going again, they were deceased. So two examples there of enclosed space incidents that I've actually been part of. If I may, I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative side of things. And basically, what I want to discuss is whether or not we have legislative sufficiency. In other words, is the legislation that we have, at least in the United Kingdom, which we hope influences and governs to a certain extent the legislation on Red Ensign Group ships, which a majority of superyacht registrations are currently made, whether or not our United Kingdom legislation is sufficient to support the need to prevent these accidents from happening time and time again. You've had the figures from Adam, and they do not make for happy reading. Is it the legislation that's causing it? Is it not the legislation that's causing it? In the United Kingdom, we fundamentally have 2 types of legislation that apply to the entering into an enclosed space. First of all, we need to think about our overarching umbrella legislation that says that every single ship must be a safe ship to work on. It's a right for seafarers to go to work into a safe working environment. And that right, under the Maritime Labour Convention 2006, is upheld in the United Kingdom with the 1997 Merchant Shipping and Fishing Vessels Health and Safety at Work regulations. This places the onus on the owner and the master as the owner's representative as the employer on board the ship to ensure that they provide a safe working environment, that they provide safety training for the crew, that they provide safety equipment for the crew, that risks are assessed and promulgated amongst the crew, that safety officials are picked from the crew, health and safety meetings are held with the crew. This is, of course, on vessels with over 5 persons on board. If you're on a small vessel with less than 5 persons, that legislation doesn't apply. And as the employer's representative, the master of the ship has an obligation to listen to, accept, and act upon any safety concerns that the crew may have. That's the sort of nitty-gritty, really, of this UK regulation, which puts the onus on the owner and the master to provide a safe working environment. We don't leave it at that in the United Kingdom. We have specific legislation that actually talks about entering an enclosed space. So we are now going away from the generic, you must provide a safe working environment, to these are the laws that exist for you to enter an enclosed space. You can see that relative to the Merchant Shipping Act, which is 1995, this is recent legislation. It's new legislation. It replaces legislation from 1988. And the Merchant Shipping and Fishing Vessels Entry into Enclosed Space regulations set out quite a lot in their application. Do they set out enough? Well, one might consider that they don't. I'm not going to talk about everything here. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that are found in it. This is a list of everything that's found in that legislation. Interpretation is important. It defines what an enclosed space is. I'll talk about that a little bit further on, because that doesn't go anywhere near far enough bringing an enclosed space to the attention of those people that are actually working alongside those spaces. Little bit of legal speak for you there. Ambulatory reference. Ambulatory reference is basically part of the law that applies to a minimum international standard, so it doesn't have to be changed in the future. The standards that we're talking about here are, of course, SOLAS and the Maritime Labour Convention 2006, and the law requires us to comply with the requirements of those conventions. Ambulatory reference basically means whatever they say, comply with it regardless of how the laws change. Entrances to enclosed spaces. Entrances to enclosed spaces must be kept secure. Doesn't actually say in the legislation they should be marked. They must be kept secure. Yeah, that means that they can't be left unattended. They can't be left open for anybody to walk in and out of. That's absolutely fine until you open them up. Legislation says they must be secure. That's great. Secure them. But enclosed spaces are opened up for the purposes of entering them. Once they're opened up, then you have to go into the next part of the legislation, which is actually the entry into enclosed space. So the master must not let anybody enter an enclosed space unless that enclosed space has been tested, unless there is a permit to work in place, unless there is a deciding structure of rescue from that enclosed space. The master has an obligation here as the employer's representative to ensure that when the entry into enclosed space is made, that procedures are followed. On vessels over 500 gross tons, those procedures are, of course, found in the safety management system. But on vessels under 500 gross ton and those vessels that are operating privately, there may not be that level of compliance with the ISM code, and therefore an entry into an enclosed space, and those vessels do have enclosed spaces. Just because they're private, just because they're less than 500 gross tons, doesn't mean that they don't have an enclosed space. Entry into those enclosed spaces is fundamentally not covered by a safety management system, but it is still covered by the legislation, and that's the important thing. Legislation is clear about that, but not everybody walks around with the laws in the palm of their hand. Most people will walk around with a safety management system or a procedure given to them by the captain or the chief officer. In the absence of a safety management system, that allows the corners to be cut, which often results in the fatalities that we have seen. Drills is now a requirement of SOLAS that every 2 months you have an enclosed space drill. This means that you talk about entry into enclosed spaces, you talk about the equipment that you're going to use to enter the enclosed space, and you talk about the extraction of a casualty from an enclosed space, and you should practice that. Doesn't mean you have to open an enclosed space to do it. You can simulate that quite nicely by using other spaces around the ship, so you don't have to endure the risk of the enclosed space just to have a drill. Testing equipment is a fairly recent legal requirement, but it only applies to vessels that are fully SOLAS compliant. However, the United Kingdom require any vessel that intends to enter an enclosed space to carry this equipment. Now, that does not necessarily translate to the Red Ensign Group. The Red Ensign Group tend to follow more aligned with international standards, which will only apply those SOLAS standards to vessels over 500 gross tons, hence what Adam was saying earlier on about the 500 gross ton limit and the carriage of that equipment. They're the main parts of the legislation. Is it enough? Is it not enough? Well, the law doesn't contain, what it doesn't contain is a legal requirement to document onboard enclosed spaces. Yeah, it's a recommendation from the MCA that the enclosed spaces are identified on board the ship and a list of enclosed spaces kept, but it's not the law. It is just a recommendation. I know most safety management systems will embrace that recommendation and will have that contained in the SMS, but legally not required to have it. There's no specialist training mandated for for ship's crew beyond the STCW PSSR that you do as your basic training. Yeah, there is a little bit in the advanced firefighting course, but that's only entering a space. It's not dangerous space rescue. So it's very, very small amount. It's not even in the syllabus. Generally, you find academies chuck it in there in the advanced firefighting course just to beef it up, really. There's no legal requirement to mark enclosed spaces and dangerous spaces. I think it's important to recognise a dangerous space, and Adam's mentioned it there. Enclosed spaces tend to be well defined, whereas dangerous spaces are the ones that slink underneath the radar. They can be considered to be the most lethal. Yeah, if you pointed an enclosed space, most people would look in there and say, "Oh, I'm not going in there." You pointed a dangerous space and most people will quite happily wander into it, such as a freezer containing dry ice. Specific general duty, I think that under the health and safety legislation, there should be a specific general duty imposed on every employer to ensure that enclosed spaces are entered safely. I don't think it's good enough to put it down as a general duty under everything else. I think it needs separation from the main part of the legislation, and it needs noting in the overarching legislation that every employer's duty would be that if they have enclosed spaces, to ensure those enclosed spaces are entered safely. In other words, take what is the master's responsibility from those legislation and make it the employer's responsibility. Yeah. And you heard me say the dates earlier on. Look at that. Okay, isn't that disgraceful? 34 years in between legislation. Yeah, so we need better, more timely reviews of this legislation to ensure that that we comply. So just before I close off here, really just some food for thought as what I think should happen in order to change the situation we're in, where we've killed all of our friends in the space of a couple of decades, and that is mandatory advanced training for entry into an enclosed space. That's entry into, if you are going to be in charge of an entry into enclosed space, or if you are the authorizing officer for a permit to work on an entry into enclosed space, you must have done a mandatory specific enclosed space course. Wouldn't be expensive, wouldn't take long, and you'd get so much out of it. The IMO audit scheme should really include enclosed space laws. III code, implementation of international instruments, checks everybody's legislation internationally and ensures that it is sufficient. The IMO should include enclosed space laws within that scheme and not just the safety management system. And dare I say it, and you know, I'm here with my tin hat, higher penalties and sentences for those that do not comply. Yeah, accidents happen, and as long as you can show that you took all reasonable steps, then that accident may have been an unforeseen risk. But if you did not take the legal steps that you are required to take, then I think going beyond the merchant shipping statutory maximum, I think is necessary to focus everybody's mind on what must and must not be done to ensure the safety of the people that they employ on board super yachts. Thank you very much, Michelle, and I shall take questions at the end with everybody else.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I don't have any questions at the moment. I'm getting them passed over from the PYA, but at the end of the session, we will revisit that. So our final speaker today is Tim Russell, and he deals with enclosed spaces as a part of his duties. So my question, as a new build engineer, are enclosed spaces in design with respect to the crew safety taken into consideration?
Hi, Michelle, and thank you, and hello everyone online and here. Yeah, that question, with respect to design, yes, spaces are considered with crew safety in mind. Yacht builders have to abide by strict rules when it comes to SOLAS and are overseen by flag surveyors. In general, enclosed and confined spaces where crew may enter on a regular basis will be ventilated, well lit, identified and labelled, have easy entry and egress points, may have atmosphere sensors installed, which is linked to the vessel's alarm monitoring system. Obviously, tanks fall under a different risk category. They'll have ladders and handholds and baffles large enough for passage, multiple ingress and egress points for ease of entry. My intention during my presentation is not to be a how-to, but to highlight the onboard requirements and ensure all vessels that have attended today understand their duty to ensure the safety of all crew on board and the resources available. Before we dive straight into the topic of enclosed spaces, it's important to briefly recap on what ISM is and how it is implemented. ISM stands for the International Safety Management. Its purpose is to provide an international standard for the safe management and operation of ships and pollution prevention. So to ensure these aims are met, the code has 3 general safety management objectives: to ensure safe practice in ship operations and a safe working environment, to assess all identified risk to ships, their personnel and the environment and establish safeguards, and to ensure constant improvement of safety management skills of personnel ashore and aboard, as well as preparation for safety and environment emergencies. The cornerstone of good safety management is commitment from the top. In matters of safety and environment protection, it is commitment, competence, attitudes, and motivations of individuals at all levels that determines the end result. So how is ISM implemented? So a management company or a captain plays a pivotal role to ensure the ISM code is implemented. The ship's SMS on board your vessel should have all the protocols and should be vessel specific. Plans and checklists form the most integral part of the implementation procedure of the ISM code on ships. Procedures are formed to tackle emergency situations on board, and it is this emergency procedure preparedness to respond to emergencies which is inculcated into the ship staff through drills and various training programs. Every activity is a team effort. Effective team meetings and discussions to help in a great way to take safety and security of the vessel to a new level. Your SMS developed by the management company and the vessel will outline all procedures to ensure safe operation and will form part of your safety training file. As the vessels I have worked on have had effective SMS protocols and safety culture in place, I've never had a near miss or incident in an enclosed space. However, I have become more experienced and qualified, and I can identify particular times in my early career where spaces I have worked in should have been treated as an enclosed space or confined space. For example, bilges and cofferdams where you can crawl through other areas, and lockers. A simple task like cleaning with solvents or painting inside the locker can turn an ordinary safe space into a dangerous space that requires ventilation and atmosphere testing. It's very easy to change your environment and get yourself into trouble if you are inexperienced and no one is aware of your work intentions. Before working in these spaces, think to yourself, if I become overwhelmed with fumes and pass out, how would I be rescued from the space, and how would my crew become aware without carrying out standard procedures? On board, you will have no doubts on enclosed spaces. The IMO definition of an enclosed space is it has limited openings for entry and exit. It's inadequate ventilation, not designed for continuous worker occupancy. This includes, but not limited to, fuel tanks, ballast tanks, sewage tanks, freshwater tanks, cofferdams, chain lockers, void spaces, storage cargo holds, adjacent spaces, and ventilation trunking. So who identifies these spaces on your vessel? So as part of your SMS, a suitably qualified and competent person on board, usually a safety officer, which is a chief officer or the captain, will use the definition set out by the IMO to identify and record a list. This is then discussed with the management and submitted, and finally flag administration for approval. The master and first officer will generally have access and knowledge of the list as part of their developed SMS. The areas identified should then be labelled as an enclosed space. If you are in doubt of any space on your vessel, treat it as an enclosed space. All areas and jobs or works associated with these spaces should have a risk assessment attached, and notification that a permit to work is required. Risk assessment should be routinely assessed and amended. So
I would just like to ask so in your experience, your vast experience, have you seen signage? Have you the SMS? Because if they're pointing out the enclosed spaces, it's also true. I've never seen signage before, unless it's
yeah. I think what Adam pointed out with his examples, I haven't seen those examples on yachts.
Okay.
But we will provide our own signage or we have done our own signage, which we attach to the enclosed space points.
Okay.
Whether that's with a red emblemed sign, which says it needs to be permit to work to enter.
Yeah, because a lot of enclosed spaces, or some enclosed spaces, actually are front facing of the guests, for example.
Yeah.
So I can see that not being.
Yeah, like spaces that are inside the locker, but
Exactly.
are bolted down, then they will have identification on that bolted down cover, a sign, but you wouldn't have it in front in the guest facing locker.
So would that not be, so if that enclosed space was defined as a closed space in their safety manual, would that have to have a signage on it? Or would they not, would they purposely not mention that that's an enclosed space for that?
As a builder's concern.
Okay.
No, I don't think the builder will be required to put a sign there, but they would identify to us that this is the enclosed space.
Okay.
And also flag will be involved in that decision as well. Okay. So before entering an enclosed space, first and foremost, you must become familiar with your SMS procedure and COSWAP. There is a great flowchart on COSWAP on page 218 for a procedure. Every vessel above 24 meters, whether private or commercial, should have this on board, normally on the shelf in the crew mess or in the bridge, but it should be fully accessible to all crew. If you don't have the current version of COSWAP, which is 2024, it is available on Amazon or UK government website where it's downloadable. Section 15 is for enclosed spaces. There is a wealth of information in this section to guide you. All crews should be given onboard training and familiarization with the risk of entry into dangerous spaces on board. Training should include vessels register of enclosed spaces, the identification of hazards, any steps taken to reduce hazards, knowledge of procedures for assessment, knowledge of how to test the atmosphere, knowledge of procedures for safe entry, knowledge of duties of those assigned, means of communication, and recognition of the signs of adverse health effects. Your task, whether from a planned maintenance system or yard list, should advise and state that a permit to work is required. You should find the risk assessment for the task and understand it. Discuss the job in advance with your team and first officer or captain before opening a permit to work, and ensure all equipment is in good condition and certified in date. Discussions are important beforehand to raise awareness. The first officer or captain may bring forward any drills or better prepare the rescue team or defer the works due to lack of trained crew on board, or the vessel operations don't allow it. So the equipment that you must have on board to perform enclosed space entry on vessels with identified enclosed spaces should have an approved remote multi-gas detector, which must detect flammable gases and vapors, oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon monoxide. Approved personal multi-gas detectors, which detects the same for gases. Communication equipment, rescue equipment approved by flag, which can include A-frames, BA sets, tether lifelines, and harnesses. PPE, such as gloves, overalls, boots, and eye protection, breathing apparatus, and ventilation equipment, such as fans and ducting. What is a permit to work? So, your permit to work will have listed all the requirements to make the enclosed space safe for entry. It is not a definitive list, but an aid memorandum, as each space has different dangers. It is used to reduce the likelihood of any danger and prevent accidents, to ensure all safety items are carried out to stop the tendency to carry out dangerous work without checks. The master must sign the permit to work, as he is ultimately responsible. Additional permits may be required for the type of works being carried out. For example, doing hot works in an enclosed space will require 2 permits for works. Your permit to work is only valid for 24 hours and must be closed when work's completed or time run out. A new permit to work must be issued for each day. So examples of permit to works on your vessel would be working aloft or on the side, hot works, general electrical less than 1,000 volts, high voltage electrical greater than 1,000 volts, and enclosed spaces. To Assess the risks before entering an enclosed space. A competent and suitably trained crew member should read the risk assessment and follow the checklist in the permit to work. If you are a new crew member with limited or no experience of enclosed confined space entry, you should read through COSWAT section 15 and discuss with your superior. Do not go into an enclosed space if your superior says it is safe to do so without first carrying out and citing a permit to work and an atmosphere check. Everyone involved in the enclosed space entry should be present to discuss the reason to enter, the work required, highlighting the dangers and the time required. So identifiable hazards in the enclosed spaces are, it could be slips, trips and falls, the toxicity, restricted movement, electrical, machinery movements, structural stability like broken ladders, biological like sewage, and environmental, so for example, temperature, noise, poor lighting and ventilation. An enclosed space should be allowed to vent for at least 24 hours before entry with contents emptied and valves isolated. The space could be pressurized, so care must be taken when opening a space. All access hatches removed in the area must be signed no entry and cordoned off during this ventilation process. So as you work through the permit to work checklist, you'll be asked to check the atmosphere with a remote multi-gas meter. This should be calibrated and certified in date. Note the readings on the permit to work and at the entrance. All should read within limits. All personnel entering must wear personal gas meters and PPE. A lookout posted and rescue team prepared and advised, and the master must sign the permit to work once completed. So the watch person must remain at the post with direct communication and not be assigned any other work. If this person is required to be called away, someone must replace that person. It is not possible, if it is not possible, the person inside the enclosed space must exit and wait to re-enter when it is safe to do so. The master must be notified of all entry and exit times when they happen. So I'll try now to explain the types of training and drills you may be asked to carry out on board if you have identified enclosed spaces on board your vessel. All crew must be involved in drills for enclosed space entry, no less than 2 monthly as required by SOLAS and part of your SMS. I've already mentioned previously what training and familiarization should involve, which includes identifying dangers, equipment use and procedures. So an example of drill training could be in the form of a tabletop discussion, utilizing your training manual, which gives everyone the opportunity to raise questions and concerns. Explain the different types of enclosed space entry points on board, and explain the rescue procedure and who is the team, and explain the typical medical emergencies. Then you would follow that with an actual drill performed in a safe environment and as realistic as possible, which is utilizing all the equipment. And this is a great opportunity to play with the equipment and check the condition. So an example of a drill would be when an enclosed space is safe with all permits to work, perhaps carry out a rescue drill with a dummy person or a weighted object near an exit point, and try to maneuver out the object, and then utilize your medical team as well. At the end of the drill, each person involved should be allowed to describe their experience, limitations, and how it could be made better or improved upon. This is important to develop your procedures. The drill must then be recorded in the ship's official log and management notified. If possible, involve your management in the drill, either in person or using an online method. Or you could record or photograph parts of the drill and send to them as a proof. The challenges you could encounter when implementing enclosed space measures on board will likely be the access to enclosed spaces for the rescue team. The equipment you wear must fit through the entry or exit hatch, and generally this is very tight. Most vessels must carry an A-frame to assist with rescue operations. Where can this be installed to assist with your rescue effort? Discuss with your flag surveyor if this is going to be problematic. How do you pull the person out safely if space is a problem? On smaller vessels, access can be very tight and the area can be overwhelming with equipment and people. So group discussions and briefings after the drill are very useful at identifying these issues and creating resolutions. Resolutions must be approved by management and flag administration to approve the method or offer guidance. So generally, when it comes to safety, all vessels should be receptive when implementing safety measures. When discussions are open, everyone is proactive, and the vessel becomes a safer work environment. Your onboard protocols may differ slightly between vessels. In general, I found that vessels above 500 gross tons have very similar SMS protocols when implemented by management companies, but may need to be tweaked to be vessel specific. Vessels below 500 gross tons tend to have a very vessel specific SMS system, but may not have a planned maintenance system or risk assessment permit to work system in place to identify dangerous spaces when jobs come up. They may be utilising a checklist as an acceptable means of replacement for a permit to work system when the risk is low, but an approved permit to work method must be utilised for high risk enclosed spaces. How can vessels under 500 gross tons implement enclosed space entry protocols? So you can identify your dangerous enclosed spaces, create a list and label them. Identify the jobs on your planned maintenance system linked to these spaces. Carry out risk assessments for these jobs. Instill a culture on board that permit to work systems are utilised for these dangerous spaces. Talk to your flag administration who can assist and advise you. Reach out to a specialist company who can assist with developing your mini ISM protocols and procedures, and use COSWAT for guidance. For all those on smaller vessels, this is good practice and training for your qualifications, and will no doubt improve the safety culture and awareness on board. Your flag administration is fully aware of the dangers of enclosed space entry and should be including yachts below 500 gross tons who are mini ISM compliant in their inspection campaign. If you are at all uncertain of your vessel compliance with enclosed spaces, ask flag and use them.
Okay.
As a chief engineer that is responsible for the safety of my team, I would like to see all vessels' safety culture brought harmoniously in line with their ISM SMS protocols. Whether you are full ISM or mini ISM, you should have regular onboard familiarization drills, which are inspected annually by your flag surveyor, unless you are exempt. This should be all vessels above 24 meters, private or commercial, irrespective of GT. At the end of the day, it is the duty of all those on board to be responsible for their safety, and this only comes from training and awareness of the dangers on board your vessel, implemented by very qualified and experienced personnel with high level of safety culture. Please be safe, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, I think the SMS, currently is the SMS not inspected every year or by the flag states?
Yes, yeah, they should be.
But
I think predominantly on the vessels greater than 500 gross tons, they are inspected annually. I'm not sure on the below 500 whether their onboard systems are heavily inspected, but I would like to see that.
Okay, I would like to thank you all for our time. That was very enlightening. I really enjoyed all of your speeches, and if we get any questions sent to us by email, I will be in touch soon, shortly. Okay, everybody have a nice evening, and thank you very much for attending.